Welcome everyone to the May 10th, 2021 Board of Directors meetings for MSAD 51. We'll call the meeting to order by roll call. Please say here when I call your name. Peter Bingham.
Here.
Kevin Desmond.
Here.
Margot Harrington.
Here.
Anne is not joining us tonight. Tyler McGinley is here. Kate Perrin is here. Yes, her birthday. Thank you. Jennifer Stewart.
Here.
Mike Williams.
Here.
Elias Leggett-Barr. I believe he's trying to join us right after a game, so he may be joining us a little late. And then Madison is not able to join us tonight. So we'll move into recognition. However, the first part of recognition is recognizing our outgoing student rep, which is Elias. So I wonder if we could maybe give him a couple more minutes to try and join us, and then move on to our second part of recognition, which is Greeley Middle School virtual tutoring program. And I believe Pippa Moody is here to talk to us about that. So Pippa, do you want to give us some insight to what you've been doing?
Tyler, I think I'm going to frame it up. Excuse me. This is Chris Hoffman. I'm going to frame it up and then pass it off to Pippa. And then I think we're going to ask to hear from Mari as well.
Awesome.
Because this is, truly a cross-building initiative that we're here to recognize and thank Pippa for. So just to get things started, we're very proud to recognize and honor Pippa tonight for what is really her initiative to start what has been a successful program. And as you'll hear Ms. Trebelcock say, I think this is something that we've wanted in our district maybe for some time. This began with an email that Pippa sent back in the midwinter, basically saying, hey, I've been talking with some other high school students, and we've been, wondering how we can help our community during this difficult time. And we thought maybe we could help out some younger students who might be struggling with their academics or otherwise. And, that was Pippa reaching out to us to start what has become a program where we've trained more than 30 high school students to be tutors for middle schoolers. And, over the course of the winter, and really we got started in earnest with the tutoring in late February and early March, and over the course of the past few months have really successfully integrated our high school students in supporting our middle schoolers most in need. And so I'll turn it over to Pippa to explain what she was thinking originally and how it's gone, and then we'll hear from Ms. Trebelcock too.
Yeah, totally. So like you already said, I kind of tried to start something because I knew that with the pandemic, a lot of academic stuff had become really challenging for many kids. And a lot of the resources that we had previously were either unavailable or sometimes hard or uncomfortable to reach and get access to. And then I also knew that the high school just didn't really have a lot of connections to the middle school at all, where I felt like we had some like the 4 or 5 in the elementary school. So I figured if there was a way that we could both academically and socially build some connections with the school, that we should do it. And then I think in terms of, you asked how it was going now. So I think in terms of how it's going now, I've heard really great things from both ends of the programs, tutors and students. I know that the students I've got to work with personally have absolutely loved being able to get academic help and also just like hang out with the big kids, because it builds some nice social connections, and also they're able to get help in a way that's, I think, more comfortable in some situations with their homework and tests and whatnot. So I think it's been really great for everyone academically and socially that are involved.
That's great.
My turn. So at the risk of being a little long-winded, I'm kind of excited about this program, so I'm going to say a few words. So over the course of my 18 years in this district, I've always wanted to create a tutoring and mentoring program between the middle school and high school students, and I failed as a teacher, as a high school assistant principal, and also as the middle school principal to lift this goal. And then along comes Pippa Moody. She approached Chris Hoffman and me about starting a tutoring program and rallied 30 of her classmates to participate in the fledgling program. Without her initiative, enthusiasm, and commitment, I doubt we would have seen the program begin this year. Because of her, we have middle school students showing up regularly to work with their tutors, with whom they have developed positive relationships. They're making good progress, and it's all thanks to Pippa's initiative and the efforts of her classmates. And I have a couple of staff testimonials to share with you that highlight how the program has been impacted. Lori Chapman, one of the ed techs who works in the program, says, "We have had 3 7th grade students who are attending on a regular basis. They each have made positive connection with a particular high school student and look forward to meeting with them. These are students who previously were not reaching out to past program, but were interested in connecting with a high school student specifically. As the 7th grade PASS facilitator, the high schoolers have been absolutely amazing and wonderful to work with and are definitely great role models. Attendance is a bit lower right now because of spring sports, but as of this week, we still have 2 of the 3 regular attendees meeting with high school students. One of the teachers reported that she has seen a noticeable improvement in one of her students' math ability, and another teacher has reported that she sees the connection a student has made as very important. Anne McLean, another ed tech who works in the program, said, "I can say having a high schooler join on a regular basis has been a huge support for me working with 6th graders this spring. In particular, Rebecca Carlson, a sophomore, has shown up consistently each Tuesday and Thursday. Becky has proven to be an incredible role model with her calm demeanor, strong academic skills, and fantastic work ethic." So the last thing I want to say is that in my experience, the most successful people in our world see problems, generate solutions, share these solutions with others, and collaborate to realize them. Pippa, as a junior in high school, has already figured this out and is demonstrating a key skill for success. I anticipate great things from you, Pippa. You're already showing you have the stuff for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pippa. This was such a wonderful recognition and such a well-timed initiative. So thank you so much. This was really wonderful to hear. Does any board members want to make mention of anything or give any comment? No pressure. I just wanted to make the space. Go ahead, Margot.
I will. I too have quiet goals for our district, and I think that this is one that is always wonderful. And I appreciate you finding the hole where it wasn't happening and working to make it happen. And I think having someone at the high school who can make that extra step. I think there's probably a lot of people that maybe thought about it, but you took it one step further, and I really respect you for that. So thank you for probably changing some people's lives this year.
Well said, Margot. Well, thank you, Pippa, and thank you, Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Belcock, for the insight. And it's great to have some student recognition tonight. So we'll hold on Elias's, because I'm sure I know I would like to say a few things for him as he is leaving us this year. So we'll move on to our approval of minutes. Do I have a motion for the April 26, 2021 minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Peter. And a second?
Kate Perrin, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, and then I'll go through roll call for approval. Peter Bingham?
Yes.
Kevin Desmond?
Yes.
Margot Harrington?
Yes.
Tyler McGinley, yes. Kate Perrin?
Yes.
Jennifer Stewart?
Yes.
Mike Williams?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next, we'll move to public comment, and I just want to check again with Andy to make sure there's nobody wanting to speak this evening.
I think I just got one. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay, thank you. While Andy's doing that, I'll just move on to communications. I just have one update that I know there's been some confusion or maybe some interest in finding out what the process is as it relates to the vacancy on our board right now in North Yarmouth. And I did reach out to the town to make sure that I could give the most updated information to the public this evening. And they will be sharing the information that I received back was that The process will be announced at the next select board meeting on Tuesday, May 18th. So that is the most up-to-date information that I have received, and I just wanted to share that since we do have a vacancy, and I have received a lot of questions about it. That's the only thing I have for communications, unless any other board members have anything they'd like to share. Otherwise, we will maybe loop back for public comment, Andy.
Yeah, I'm sending out the invite now. I don't know if you want to put it off. He emailed really late.
Okay. Yeah, we can move into the public hearing, and we can push the public comments to afterwards. Maybe just hopefully they're watching and know that we will get back to them. So we will move into the public hearing for the MSAD 51 budget, and I will kick this over to Kevin, who has spent, I'm sure, a good amount of time preparing for this process. So thank you, Kevin.
This will be a lot better when I turn the microphone back on. Can someone confirm that you can see the document in front of you?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Look at that. The toughest thing is done. Yes, Tyler, thank you for the opportunity to walk us all through this tonight. And I'd be remiss, of course, if I didn't thank the entire Budget Committee for their work on this, Finance Committee, as well as Mr. Poulin's tireless hours that he put up with me in preparation for this. This budget, as we're going to talk through in mere moments, is what you approved at our last meeting together, and our discussion tonight is centered on folks in the community. And while it doesn't appear that we have people signed up to speak, if you are watching this recorded, there's many opportunities for you to seek additional clarifications, as well as ask questions of any of us on the board prior to the vote on June 8th. With that being said, what I'm going to do is walk through a few things tonight, my friends, and talk about what everything means, again, breaking this down and then pausing for questions. Our mandate for this discussion tonight does come from the governor, that we are able to present these articles virtually as opposed to having a public meeting. So as you see in front of you, and if you're playing along at home, these documents are on the district's website. And we begin our discussion here with the expenditures for the 2021-2022 school budget. And you can see in front of you 11 articles. And just to go through these ever so briefly, they're pretty straightforward. Regular instruction, and you can see the dollar amounts with those. I want to pause in a couple places that might seem odd if somebody is watching this for the first time. And I'll start with Article 3, Career and Technical Education, where this reflects a $0 amount. That is the PATHS program, and it is funded differently and not directly from us. As you look at Article 4, Other Instruction, again, if you're trying to look at these numbers, these include co-curricular, extracurricular, athletics, and drama, just to give you an idea of what sits in that topic. Looking at Article number 5, Student and Staff Support. That is, those are monies that go towards the library, guidance, nursing, our technology department, professional development to improve instruction, among other things. As we look at Article 6, System Administration, and that is broken down by folks that sit in the red building. This is the superintendent, secretarial support, Mr. Poulin, as well as the entire accounting department. Article 7 is school administration, and that includes many of the folks on the discussion tonight, the principals, their secretarial support, as well as expenses to run the office. Article 8 is transportation and buses. You're familiar with these. Facilities maintenance, debt service, and all other expenditures. I will pause if anybody has connected, Andy, and see if there are any questions from the community regarding Articles 1 through 11.
Nope, nobody's connected, and no other emails.
I feel slighted, Andy, but I'm going to press on nonetheless. When we look at the next segment, which is state subsidy local tax revenues for the 2021-2022 school budget, This is Article 12. And if you're looking at this one, the state mandated explanation, just to provide this for the community, the district's contribution to the total cost of funding public education from pre-K to grade 12 is described in the Essential Programs and Services Funding Act, is the amount of money determined by state law to be the minimum amount the district must raise and assess in order to receive the full amount of state dollars. So if you're looking down below, you can see two different columns here. The column on the left is the amount appropriated by individual municipalities and arriving at this sum of $27,342,463.56. This is a fully loaded amount that includes state subsidy. In order to get this amount of money, we must raise locally this amount, $14,702,690. That is, if you are sitting with a calculator, is 7.9%. That is the state mandated amount in order to get the subsidy. Let me pause for questions, Andy, from anybody in the community.
Negative. I'll interrupt you with somebody emails.
Well, thank you. Of course, seeing none, we'll move to Article 13. This one as well, and I'm just jumping down to the mandated explanations as well. It's non-state funded debt service, that is the amount of money needed for the annual payments on the district's long-term debt for major capital school construction projects that are not approved for state subsidy. The most important line is the last one. This bonding of the long-term debt was previously approved by district voters. These are things that have been approved in the past, but still appear as Article 13. I will assume, since Andy hasn't jumped in, that I can move to Article 14. Article 14, the explanation here is the additional local funds that are locally raised funds over and above the district's local contribution for the total cost of funding public education from pre-K to grade 12 as described in the Essential Programs and Services Funding Act, and the local amounts raised for the annual payments on non-state funded debt service that will help achieve the district budget for educational programs. This one here, you can see the dollar amount that is that the district that we have as a board requested be raised. This is $12,007,067.51. This is those things that sit outside of the state's requirements, sit outside those averages. The state looks at Maine as a whole, and when you get into southern Maine, there's some things that that don't actually translate. Looking at statewide numbers. These are some of those things like the funding for AP, IB, co-curricular, substitute teachers, and the like. This is essential to the work that we do as a district. I'm assuming no questions, so I will move to 15. 15 is the summary of the totals of the 2021-2022 school budget. There's not a definition for this, but the school board recommends that the district authorize the school board to expend $41,846,284.94 for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2022. Within these, if you're doing the math, you can simply take everything that existed up here on 1 through 11, and that amount here broken out into the cost centers is what this total is down here in Article 15. That brings us to the second part of the public hearing, which is the referendum articles, and these are broken down pretty well, not as complex as those first 15 articles, but these sit in 3 different places. So Article 1 is actually asking if the school should appropriate the amount of $41,846,284.98 and then raise the amount of $29,022,476.42 for 2021. We, of course, as a board, when we were together last, recommended a yes vote to this. The information that follows for folks in the community, this is broken out pretty well, where it talks about where the monies are coming from, those we referenced in 1 through 11, and then talks about the additional local amount that has to be raised. These totals can be viewed here, and again, they total up as a result of all the cost centers. We had extensive discussions as a board, as you recall from our last meeting, and that was talking about the district reserve fund. And this is our ability under statute to be able to set money aside for things that may happen during the year. This really is that building reserve fund. We do this every year in order to maintain facilities and our infrastructure. The question is, shall the school board be authorized to transfer $300,000 from unallocated balances to the district's capital reserve fund for renovations and other minor capital costs, and expend $300,000 from said reserve funds for those purposes? This does not have an impact on the taxes that we're raising, but this makes it possible for us to set money aside for these two critical places: renovations that come up in the course of the year and other minor capital costs. And then finally, this is something that I hope we never have to look at after a year like this, but Article 3 is talking about the contingency fund for COVID and other emergencies. At its core, this is allowing us to be agile in the way that we approach having everybody back in school in the fall. And this, the question is, shall the district authorize the school board to establish and transfer $350,000 from unallocated balances to a non-lapsing contingency fund for emergency expenditures during the COVID-19 emergency or other periods of financial emergency pursuant to Section 1482B 3 of Title 20-A, and to expend up to $350,000 from the contingency fund for COVID-19 related expenditures not included in the operating budget. You can read the rest of these. We had an extensive discussion about this allows us to do those things in the action next year to ensure that we can continue to deliver an in-person learning experience to all of the students within the district. Tyler, this is the summary that we're putting out in front of the community tonight for the public hearing.
Thank you, Kevin. So grateful to have you go through that. Are there any action items beyond this explanation that we need to, Scott or Kevin?
In terms of action items, I believe, Scott, and correct me if I'm wrong, we've done everything that we needed to do in terms of signing warrants and putting these documents out into the public.
We have. We posted everything in the communities, and those are the last section 2 of the articles that will be on the voting ballots when people go to the polls in June.
The only thing missing from this, Tyler, that again, I want to point out, we talked through this at depth in each of our meetings, but when you look at the percentages that are being allocated to each community, these are, we've hit a solid target, looking at Cumberland at 1.06 in terms of an increase, and North Yarmouth at 0.91. So we've done the very best that we can to present to the community a very responsible budget. I know that the board felt strongly that we endorse this as a yes in the community. And there is time between now and June 8th. I would encourage any member of the community to seek guidance from anybody on the board, of course, including the superintendent, Mr. Poulin, members of the finance committee. But we've done our very best to present something that is should be easy to pass.
Thank you, Kevin. And I just want to repeat what Kevin said, that if people do have questions, that we are available, and we really hope that people stay engaged with the process and ask as many questions as possible so that they can truly wrap their heads around this. Is that what you just went through, Kevin, is not a normal summary of things, and it can be confusing. So if people want to reach out, please do not hesitate. It's good to feel informed, especially when we're voting. So thank you very much, Kevin, for going through that. And Scott, finance team, it's a lot of work. So moving into presentations, the first presentation we have this evening is from David Shapiro and Eliza Miller regarding the proposed project information around an artificial turf field. So I believe, oh, I see Eliza. I'll let you guys take it from here.
Hello. I'm Eliza Miller, the chair of the Athletic Advisory Board, and I'm here at the high school athletic office with our Athletic Director David Shapiro. And we are here because the installation of an artificial turf surface at the high school is on the project list to be wrapped into the school bond later this year. Given the forecasted increase in the student population, we would like to see the use of the Glenn Hutchins Field maximized. Converting the high school's grass field to a turf field could potentially increase usage tenfold. So this presentation covers the current field usage, the high school and the middle school practice locations. There's a site map, projected field use numbers, field use comparisons, the cost, and our planning to date. We can take questions this evening or collect questions and then get back to you later. So right now, I am going to start presenting and pass this on to David. Get back to the beginning. All right.
Present mode.
Let's see, there you
Okay,
go.
well, there we are. Thank you, everybody, for allowing us into your homes this evening for our presentation. Again, I'm David Shapiro, the athletic director here, and I have to tell you, I'm pretty excited about having this opportunity to present this tonight. It's something that's been on our radar for a while, and glad to share with you a little bit of information about it. So we'll whip right through this. First, you have a picture on the left of our current Glenn Hutchins Field. And I have to be candid, there was a purpose behind the picture that you have right there, because there's no one using it. It looks great. And the purpose of, again, our goal is to present to you why we really feel we should have a turf field here. And you can see from the numbers on the right that we get 162 hours of use out of this field right now. And that's right now predominantly, or almost entirely, lacrosse and soccer for both boys and girls. The other team that had used it in the past was football, but as a co-op, we are at Falmouth right now. Next slide. Just a little bit of a background of what we do. The left-hand side gives you an indication of the teams that do practice here on our campus. Again, we have limited green space here on campus. And we utilize the area down below at the middle school. And the teams that practice here are field hockey for the high school, and that's JV and varsity. They do have their own dedicated field right now, and that is inside the track. GMS 7th and 8th field hockey practice down below on the middle school field, as does the GMS baseball team, the GMS softball team, the GMS lacrosse team, although occasionally they do go to Twinbrook in practice. And then, pardon me, the varsity girls lacrosse team and the GMS soccer teams, the boys, also practice here on campus. So there's a lot going on right there. And then you can see the numbers on the right are the teams that practice at Twinbrook. And that is really, by and large, everybody. So on a regular day, we have a lot of activity down the road, a couple miles down. The other thing you should know, too, is historically we have bused folks down to Twinbrook, and that was generally 3 trips a day. COVID has curtailed that significantly. As a matter of fact, ended it. So we practice later in the evening so that parents can get their kids down to Twinbrook right now. So yeah, that's the end of that. We can go on to the next one. Next we have here, just as you can see, the map of the campus. And if I could toggle over, yes, I can. So there, my cursor is right now. That is the Glenn Hutchins Field. Down below it is where the middle school practices many of their activities. It's a softball field. I go, oop, and I went too far. I'm cheating here. I'm giving you information before you get it, letting you look ahead here. So long story short, that's the map of our facility, and some of that green space that is down here is going to disappear when we have some modulars. We'll go next.
Ready?
Yep. And the potential usage of the turf field is multifaceted. First and foremost, we'll be able to have more physical education classes throughout the district, and those will be regularly scheduled out there. Our Greeley athletic teams, our high school will practice there, as well as the middle school, and we'll be able to have contests for soccer, field hockey, football, and lacrosse. Not to mention a significant amount of community use for both Cumberland and North Yarmouth on youth leagues and on the weekends. You can go next. So this is a nice visual we have here of a potential. This is our current usage for what is a normal May, and the potential usage you would see when we have a turf field. And it's very straightforward. You see a lot of white, a lot of open space, and it's about 8 or 9 dates during the course of the month that we would use the facility. And looking to the right, would be the potential usage. And that's really every single day. That includes the youth time to be out there. So I'm trying to go in concert here with 2 computers. And here's again, same principle. This is September. A typical September for us is a couple of games a week. A typical September going forward with a turf field would be significantly more usage. And that's games, that's weekend activities, and that's practices. And I think the practices are a big thing for us to be able to do. And one note on the current usage calendar, even if we scroll, can I go back?
Yeah.
To May, again, there's only a handful of dates there. Already this year, we've had to scratch 4 of those dates because I've had to send our teams elsewhere. Our field was just not, it can't endure any weather, and it can't endure too much playability, which is why we have so many gaps here. So twice the boys lacrosse teams have had to play games over on someone else's turf, once at Freeport and once at Cape Elizabeth. And our boys also had a scrimmage preseason game because our field was not ready. That was on NYA's turf. And our girls have asked and have been able to practice over at Falmouth on their turf field. So that gives you some idea of what goes on. And then in this particular slide, fairly self-explanatory, but one of the things that's important, I think everybody should know, how did we come to this, potential usage that is tenfold more than we're currently using? And it encompasses, I'll just break it down real briefly. There's fall high school sports, and that's all we've had in the past. And then now it'll be fall community sports, as well as fall physical education. We do the same thing in the spring. There will be the high school sports that will include our practices. There'll be the spring physical education and miscellaneous activities for school, as well as spring community usage. And then beyond that, we would even have summer usage. And I think what is important to note about all the information you see on the right, on the potential usage, any one of those little constructs is significantly more than we currently use for the entire year. And really our goal is to be able to maximize the amount of play that we get on the field that is right here in our backyard. So there you go, next one. Just a quick little note about the number of schools in our area that do have turf fields. That list is extensive. Waynfleet in the bottom with the asterisk is to be built this coming year. And I've also heard tell that Gardner is another one not too far away. And most of our neighbors do have a turf field. And I think it would benefit us significantly to have one. Okay. Next, probably a question everybody has, how much does this thing cost? And we had, as Eliza had mentioned earlier, we'd done some work on this a few years ago. Fay, Spofford, and Thorndike engineers, S&W Cole Engineering, had given us some of the details of the site itself. We needed to make sure that it was a feasible site for us to put a turf field. And the good news is it is. They did a really nice job, and they pushed that forward for us. And we actually have a timeline that we could go by and know exactly what we need to do month to month going forward for when we would start a project. And if all goes well, we would love to have shovels in the ground this time next year. And the number that we have there, the $12.50 a square foot, that comes from a variety of sources, including these turf companies. Field Turf is one, Greenfields is another, Shaw Field Turf is another, and AstroTurf. And they were all spot on about being $12.50 a square foot. And the footprint that we have right there is 114,000 square feet. That's bigger than an actual playing surface, but that's important to note because we would want to maximize that surface so that we could have multiple teams out there practicing at once. If, for instance, would be our entire boys soccer team could be out there, our first team, a JV, and a varsity, all at the same time. And that's, again, maximizing the use of the facility. One note on here is it does not include any other facility upgrades that we may wish to do. And here we are at the end. This is our last slide. Then we'll open it up to questions. But again, we want to maximize the use of our green space, especially here in the hub of our community. I think one of the funnest parts of being a student athlete here, and we do have anywhere from in a short year about 65% to close to 75, 80% of our students participate in athletics here. And it is a great place to be on game night. And the more we can draw folks here into our community, the better. Another note is that the MPA surfaces that are turf used turf fields are for field hockey, football, soccer, and lacrosse. All those state championships and also regional championships are played on turf fields. A turf field will allow for late season playability in the fall, which we currently don't have, and also early season playability, which is something, again, we've had to shuffle teams around in order before we could get on the field in the spring. And that does curtail our ability to compete, although not a whole lot because we still do pretty well. And usage would be 9 months of the year. And long story short, we want our community to be more active, and a turf surface on our Hutchins Field would allow for that. And that is the end of our presentation, and we would certainly take any questions if you have any.
Thank you both. I'll open it up to the board. If you just want to raise a hand, I'll call, and I'm sure there might be a few questions. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. There we go. I think David and maybe Eliza, you can help out. How long
Yes, sorry.
is a turf field when we put it in? What would be the maintenance on it, and what would be kind of I know there's a few neighboring communities that have had issues with theirs and they need to replace it. Is that 10 years out, or is it more of a 5-year commitment, and kind of what would not to get into the details, but kind of maintenance on it going forward after we get something like this?
That's a great question. The first one, the maintenance annually is next to nothing. I worked at Hamden Academy for 7 years, and we had a turf field there. And basically we would, if we get, again, there's several types of surfaces too. I won't get too far into the weeds, but some have an infill and some don't. So if it were to have an infill, it's just to really spread that around, and maybe you add in the high usage areas. That's about it for maintenance in any given year. And then to the playability and the longevity of the turf, again, to the field we had at Hamden Academy, it was just replaced after 19 years. That was initially a 5-year warranty, and that at the time was like the gold standard. Now and so it was a 5-year warranty, and it lasted for 19. So now generally you can get a 12-year guarantee for the materials and the surface. And I would imagine that the playability with that would probably double, much like it has, for those older materials as well.
Okay, thank you, David.
So I think it'd be fair to say 20 years you'd have that out there before you need to replace it.
And probably the school that I'm referencing more had vandalism with theirs, right? Yep. And that's why it's not issues. Just with issues of being worn out, rather.
Yeah, no issues with it being worn out. It's usually, if you have any issues, it had to do with the installation. I know in Yarmouth, when they first put in a turf field, they had some significant issues with the subsurface. Yeah.
Mike Williams.
Thanks. And thank you for the presentation. This is really great. Just a very quick question, especially given the potential significant construction we're about to undertake, and that's going to change the whole traffic pattern of the whole campus. With adding tenfold amount of practices, games, and such, that will probably impact our parking and traffic flow. Have we given thought how to those two things coming together?
That's a great question. And I'd have to say, initially, we probably have to look at that a little further. Most of that is when you have the right after school, they're already here. Right. And then as we go later into the evening, I guess probably not a whole lot different than the patterns we would have for a normal game night. So yeah, we have a bunch of containers out back right now. We'll have to work around come this fall and spring a little bit. But I think, yeah, that's a great question. But off the seat of my pants, probably not a whole lot we would need to do, because it's not a whole lot different than the game days that we have. We are a very active, vibrant, hub of the community to begin with. But we can
No, I appreciate that, and potentially it's a more of a question for the architects and just in understanding that. The only other question is, I imagine this would probably lessen burden on Twin Brook. That's a fair
Correct.
assumption, right? Yeah. Yeah, that would be a good thing.
That's
all I have.
Yes, more opportunities for the passive recreation that goes on out there. Again, going back to my past experience, the grass fields really were able to rebound and be more vibrant because more use was pushed towards the turf. So I imagine that would be the case at Twin Brook as well.
Margot, and then Elias.
David, could you talk about, I understand that it doesn't get worn down like grass and it's not affected by the weather, but logistically, scheduling wise, how would you add that many more people on the field? Would people be having practice late at night if they were, the fourth sport that happened to be scheduled for the field? I'm just curious, how could it get that many more people on it?
That's a great question, and actually it's an easy answer because normally game nights we're there until 9 o'clock at night, and so really we could have a practice right before school. I mean, not every night is a game anyways, and so you're able to utilize the time right after school, and we will go to probably, ideally we'll end at 8 if there are no games that night, and still be able to do that, but we're able to do it every day. We have Saturdays also. And so there's some teams that are on there concurrently, programmatically. So it's not and then not everybody long story short. So if we were playing a home game, we would want to make sure, so the girls soccer is playing a home game this week or two. We want to make sure that they're going to have priority to practice that week. We're still going to use Twin Brooks. And so we're going to rotate the teams through. We're not all going to practice on it every day. That's not a possibility. We do not want to be 10 o'clock at night, shutting off the lights and sending kids home. So for some of them, that time frame might work well, but for the rest of us, we don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. As the mom of a former 10:30 at night track person,
Exactly. Yes.
It's hard.
Yes.
All right. And also, would you please share your presentation with us in some kind of link form so we can look at it?
Certainly. Yes.
I bet there are more questions that people won't think of right now.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll do that.
Thank you, Margot. Elias?
So I guess my first question is in reference to the, will there be any other infrastructure changes, say, such as the field light? Because I know the current lights on the field, aren't up to, specifications to play lacrosse because they're not, the right light. Will that be kind of a package deal with the implementation of the turf, or is that a whole separate issue?
That's a great question, but I have a question for you first. How did your team do today?
Oh, we playing on a grass field, would you believe? We won, I think it was 10-2 versus Greater Gloucester, so
Excellent.
that's sorry about that, but it was a good team effort.
Yeah, that was twofold. I knew that's where you were, and I also want to know how you did. So to answer your question, though, about other infrastructure, there is no other infrastructure included in what we're doing right now, but we do have some plans to have some upgrades, whether it's for concession areas, a weight room, some storage. But specifically to the question about lights, at this point, I wouldn't think it would be worth our while to investigate lights. That's this is 8 years ago. That was $275,000. And the only reason we would need them is because they're not rated for small balls. So we can't play lacrosse at night on our field. And really, when we have our season, we're not going to wait until 8 o'clock at night to turn on the lights so that we can play a game, in the spring. And if we do it too much earlier in the year, it's inclement at best, and that's probably not the best time for us to be, playing night games either. So really, the lights would be a secondary thing, or maybe even somewhere else down on the priority list, because we still get ample usage even with what we have for current lighting structure. But a good question. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. And just one, is there I'm not sure if I missed this in the presentation, but is there an expected timeline for the completion of the construction when it would start? Like, would it be like a year timeline, half a year timeline, or is that still up in the air?
Well, to actually build it from start to finish, I mean, if we go through if I'm reading this right from a prior report, if we started in January getting permitting and whatnot, we would have shovels in the ground in June and be ready for the following fall. So I guess my wish list, and this is would be that this goes to a referendum or whenever that is in the fall, and through the permitting process, et cetera, if things go smoothly, and depending on where it fits in all the overall projects, I might be talking out of school a little bit here, but depending on where it would fall in the project, it could be ready for the following season, fall season to play.
Awesome, thank you.
And Mr. Poulin could correct me if I'm wrong on any of that information.
I see Jeff's hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, thank you, David and Eliza. This is a great presentation. I think it really goes to show the possibilities with having a artificial turf field. It also expands during the day, as David pointed out as well, a lot of usage that we could be getting out of that for PE classes. As you know, we've had, especially over the last year, a lot of our elementary students have been walking up to the track and walking the track during the day, during recess time, and to be able to open the turf field up also for other possibilities during the school day would be important. I would almost build this as a necessity along with the primary school project, which I also consider to be a necessity. And so in some ways, I really think these projects should be wrapped together or considered as part of a package. In order to do one, you've got to also include other things to make this work on campus. You know, the campus is crowded. We're obviously trying to acquire land if the voters agree and build a new school, but a turf field will also give us more flex space and more room to maneuver on the campus, and also keep our students on campus after school for practices, games, et cetera. I think that's one of the hallmarks, as David and Eliza have pointed out, of our school community. People like seeing that. This would be a huge opportunity for us to keep our students on campus. I just think that in some ways, in order for us to continue expanding our campus, this isn't really a nice to have anymore. This has really become a necessity, you know, for our school community.
Thank you, Jeff. The only question I have is if there's any environmental impact that we should be aware of. I know that there's conversation about artificial materials being put into the ground, and I was just curious if there's any insight to that.
It's not into the ground. I mean,
Yeah, there's nothing that we have found, again, in our research from a few years ago, and currently I've talked with our, folks at the Maine Medical Partners and whatnot, any reservations they had about this. And, Scott maybe could speak to maybe the environmental impact if it's, or, what we did with any other mitigation of, when the old orchard was there and this, that, and the other thing. But that's really all that I can think of right now. And I believe that was addressed in the surveys, the soil samples, yes.
That was done 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, there's been testing of the soils in that site because of the old orchard and some arsenic. The surface would be careful about the moving of the soil, because it does need to be leveled. There's a bit of a drop off from one end to another, and they've felt comfortable that could all be done safely, and the turf surface would cover all that. So, and that was pointed out in that early report that we had done. So that's something we're on top of, and we will be considering what type of infill to put on the field, and there are a few options. So that's to come.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Peter, you had your hand raised. I don't see it anymore.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on the arsenic, because that was when we were doing stuff the last time, we really got bit on that. So, I mean, I think, nice to say that they can cover it up and everything, but we've just had too much bad history with arsenic on that whole thing. So I just want to make sure we've got everything covered, because we do not have a good history of that.
So, and I can tell you that one of the responses we got, and Scott, you can tell me if I got this right, is that I think we were told you would need to like eat wheelbarrows full of the dirt in order to have any effects from what is there right now. And that, certainly with what we're going to do to cover it up, that would certainly not, it's a non-issue from what we were told.
That's correct, David. And part of the whole piece that we had looked at was any further remediation that needed to be done. And, we've always been able to encapsulate that and take care of it on the campus. So, but you're right, Peter, there was some issues when we were doing the middle school and dealing with that. We had some issues around that, but we've encapsulated it and bermed it. And, we do a VRAP environmental program every year with it. So, and as David said, you'd literally have to eat, as we've been told, wheelbarrows full of it. It's not like you can be the goalie in front of the goal and really be affected.
Okay, thank you.
Margot and Jeff? Margot, you're muted.
Good. That gives me time to think a little more. What is the situation with if it rains? Does rain go through it, or is the middle school going to get flooded because it's collapsed and comes down the hill at it?
Nope, that's a whole process that's part of the process. One of the reasons why that site is excellent. It drains really well right now. There's already infrastructure there. And then part of the building process at $12.50 a square, it does encompass doing some sub work. And so that's one of the things that they do is the layer upon layer, and some of it is some piping that goes underneath it, culverts or whatnot, to make sure that doesn't happen. Yeah, that's a piece. That's a whole piece of the building process. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff, did you still have your hand raised? Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to see if David or Eliza could speak to the health pieces, not around with the ground, but the actual material. I know years ago when we were looking at the turf field, there were concerns that still were raised around, is it safe to have an artificial turf field? A lot of advances have been made over the last few years in the material that's used. Personally, I think it's a non-issue these days, but I know that there are still concerns out there. David, do you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, that's fine. I think it is still a non-issue. So anecdotally, there were some like positional players. I think it was goaltenders. If you read about that, they said, hey, they keep getting it. There's some health hazards for them, but there has been nothing documented in any study that's indicated that for that to be true. And so, yes, I think there's some anecdotal stuff out there. The only concern I think is occasionally there are some brands of this that in the midst of the summer, it gets hot. So that it does reflect the heat a bit, but we already have a mitigation that we do when we're using a grass field. We do not compete between 10 and 2 in the hot months. That just doesn't happen in the summertime. We go in the morning early, we go in the evening. We don't compete on that in the heat of the day. So that's really the only thing that I can think of that would be of any significance as it does warm up. But living where we do in the late fall and in the early spring, that's a good thing.
David, can you speak to injuries as well?
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing. Again, years ago, anecdotally, it's bad for your ACLs, ankles, this, that, and the other thing. But that's simply not true. I mean, what we find is that we would have, again, especially living in our environment, we have a stable and viable surface that is consistent throughout the year. Right now we got little pock marks, so the goal mouths get worn. So really, in terms of the safety, that too is a non-issue. It is no more or less dangerous than a nice grass field.
Scott, I still see your hand. I don't know if you're...
And what I was going to add is we actually have a great opportunity behind the high school, because during the construction projects that we were doing, we actually pushed some great interest rates and bond premiums, when we're able to upgrade the bleachers that you see out back. It used to be the old wooden on the angle iron out back there, so we're able to push that in the press box and get those done. But yeah, it's there's certainly other components of this project that we should probably discuss and consider, which are the field house that's there now, which houses all of the maintenance equipment. It actually creates a hazard with having plows and lawnmowers and all kinds of equipment down around that area. That field house should become the property of athletics and become more geared towards athletics, whether it's got bathrooms in it or it's, you know, geared towards storage or whatever down there. It's just not a good place that we're storing all of our maintenance items. And so I would look at some kind of an upgrade on that facility as well when we did the turf field, and try and discuss that a little bit.
That'd be great. Thank you, Scott. I don't see any other hands raised. I'm guessing that a good best next step for this would be to bring this to the facilities committee to talk about it further. I'm wondering, Jeff, if you have any other comments about kind of next steps.
No, tonight we wanted to bring this forward, you know, and I appreciate David and Eliza. They've done so much research on artificial turf fields over the years and brought this forward. And I think this presentation is very helpful in showing the usability piece of it and the need for it on our campus as we continue growing. So I think the next step would be the facilities committee. I think that's a great place for some more detail to be discussed. And then you know, when the board discusses the entire scope of the project and makes a decision about the scope of the project, hopefully in June, we wanted to make sure that you had this information in order to decide if this was something that you wanted to include as part of the bond referendum package. I'll just tell you early that I will put a formal recommendation together prior to that, but I am planning on including in my recommendation that an artificial turf field be placed on the Glenn Hutchins field as part of this entire project, basically out of necessity. And we're getting to a point where, because we're investing in the campus itself and we're not having two properties, that we really need to invest, you know, heavily in this campus. This would be one of the important ways for us to do that all around. So I think hopefully that answer your next steps, but I think a dedicated facilities committee meeting on just this topic would be a good idea.
Okay. Great, thank you. David, did you have another comment?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to present tonight. Again, we're very excited about this. It's something that's been on our radar for a while, and I just want to say thanks for your time and ask some great questions. And certainly Eliza and I would be happy to answer any more that you have, and we'll get you the presentation as well.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I know this has been on the minds of many, so it's exciting to finally talk about it and bring it to facilities. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving into the second part of our presentation, we will be looking at the draft reopening plan for 2021. That is something that's taken a lot of work, and I am happy to pass it over to Jeff to start that presentation.
Are you able to see that?
No, Jeff, we can't.
Okay, sorry.
There you go.
So tonight I'm presenting it's just basically a first read draft of the reopening plan, and I'd like to thank upfront the administrative team, the leadership team of our district for putting a lot of work into this. A lot of information has been considered over a long period of time as we've reworked this plan. This actually is the plan that we have in place, and it's been completely reworked for next year. So it's the current pandemic response plan that the board approved back in August for this current school year. We took that plan and then redrafted it into the 21-22 reopening plan. So tonight is just the first read. It's a draft. I'm going to go through some key areas of the plan. First of all, letting you know that this presentation is not the plan. The actual plan is at this link, and we'll be sending this plan out this week to everyone, so they will have a chance to look at the draft. So this will be sent out through our usual communication channels. But this presentation tonight just goes over some key areas in the plan, but we will be certainly linking in the actual plan that will be going out to all stakeholders this week. So just to recap the current year's priorities, we had 2 priorities. Number 1, and they were in this order: health and safety, following the CDC and MDOE requirements this year. We had a health team. We still have a health team, which has been meeting for about a year now. That includes our district physician, nursing staff, our leadership team, and also the association leadership as part of that, part of our health team. So that's a really great group. They've been helping to guide a lot of practices with health and safety, keep in connection with our liaison at the Department of Education as well. And then our district, obviously, and I give huge amount of credit at this point to our nursing staff for managing 107 positive COVID cases to date, and all the contact tracing that is required to go with that. So obviously, health and safety has been, during a pandemic year, very important. The second one is obviously academic quality, investing in our hybrid model, which is quite honestly, I think 4 times we've revisited whether or not we were going to continue in the hybrid model. 4 different times since about a year ago. And looking at that and deciding, what needed to be tweaked and whether or not we were going to continue in the hybrid model. So it's been an exhaustive review of our model. And of course, most recently on April 6th, the board recommitted to it for the rest of the school year. And then secondly, is around essential standards. This has been even more important. This was part of our original strategic plan, that most of it we've put on hold, but the essential standards were in the strategic plan. We moved that up when the pandemic hit. It's important for us to know exactly what are the most important things that students need to know in a content area by the end of a grade level, in order to make sure that they're getting those essential standards at a minimum. And during a pandemic year, when there's less in-person learning, it was very important for teachers to be able to establish that at each content level, each content area and grade level. So here's some givens going forward, and this will help frame the plan itself. And this is also included in the plan itself, recognizing, I think, first that we are transitioning as an entire globe to a post-pandemic situation. So we're, I think, depends on who you're talking to, but I think most forecasts is that we are getting towards the end of the worst part of the pandemic, and that we have started transitioning to a post-pandemic world. And that could be a debate, I'm sure, unto itself for a week, but I think there's general feelings among most experts that that's where we're at. Reopening all schools, these are givens in this plan. Reopening all of our schools to in-person instruction 5 days per week in September, per the board's approved 21-22 calendar, which called for that. Number 3 is continuing to follow all of the CDC and MDOE guidelines, and this includes the current 3-foot classroom distancing. I put guideline, but it's actually a rule for students to be retained in district-wide. So that's something that we still need to contend with in the district. And as I have previously talked about, we have plans for making that happen, and I'm actually going to reiterate some of that in a few moments. Using the current plan, as I mentioned, as a springboard for the reopening plan, you'll see a lot of components of that, and continue curtailing much of the strategic plan. I think that's still an open discussion with the board around what activities in the strategic plan should move forward as priorities. But I also know, in my own head, I'm thinking that as we transition, we really need to continue focusing on transitioning out of the pandemic, and the academic and instructional piece needs to come first before anything else. And that's the last one, which is the heavy academic and instructional focus for optimal student learning. So this will look familiar, and this still guides our plan that we have going into the next year. You'll see in the plan, though, that we reorganized the levels. So instead of putting red first, which was in the current plan, or is in the current plan, yellow and green, we've put green first. And that's by design and on purpose. That is our default level that we are reverting to. This year, obviously, our default level has been yellow. I see no indications that we would be using yellow actually at all next year. I can't think of a situation or scenario that we would be starting or in the middle of the year, end of the year, or any time in between actually using yellow. We left it in there because obviously we want to make sure that just in case we've got it, and we've been using it for a year, but I don't anticipate using it at all. And as a result, in the plan, we actually took it out of putting it on the paper and used it as more of a link and a reference that we can go back to. So the two components of this plan you'll see are green and red. I believe that we will be in green for the vast majority of next school year, and that's the level we'd start in. I think red would only be if there is some scenario or situation that comes up, much like we've had this year, where a school has to close for a day based on circumstances with the pandemic. That would most likely be earlier in the school year. Hopefully, as we continue transitioning out of the pandemic, there'll be less occurrences for that to happen. But certainly, there's scenarios that could come up where we could be in red for a day or two. I think with the vaccinations taking hold and a lot of people getting those vaccinations, the likelihood of being in red is going to become less and less as time goes on. But we've got it in our plan. These are contingencies, and it's important that we have all these things right at our fingertips if we need them. But again, I think most of our school year, and certainly the start, I'm anticipating will be 100% 5 days a week as you approve the calendar. So these are completed activities. This is obviously not exhaustive, but I just want to give you some ideas about things that have been going on for a few months or a few weeks in some cases. We've brought 166 students to date back into the school 4 days a week, and this is part of cohort C. We already had about 20 students who were in cohort C from the beginning of the year, so this is an additional number to that 20 or so students that we've had. And this has all occurred in the last week or so as we've continued rolling out cohort C. Updated contact tracing. The state changed its contact tracing guidelines a couple weeks ago. The nurses have started implementing those guidelines. In fact, we've been able to not quarantine people already who are fully vaccinated. And we've also been able to not quarantine people who are in a classroom necessarily or in a space in a building. Not all the people in that space have to be quarantined anymore. And we've been able to reduce the number of quarantines based on the state's new guidance. So I'm very excited about that. It is a lot of work for our nurses and our administrators, but they've been doing a great job making this happen so that we don't have students that have to quarantine at this point, or some that don't. Storage units have been delivered. This was in time for the cohort C, and making sure that we got equipment out of spaces that we previously did not need during the yellow hybrid model, but we do need them obviously during cohort C. Space cleaning out of buildings for cohort C, that's related to the storage units, as you know, and this is stuff I have previously gone through. Looking at our federal funds, which is the ESSER 3 budget, we have about $300,000 in ESSER, I'm sorry, $400,000 in ESSER 3 money. And we have developed a budget as I've previously provided, and I'll go through that again in just a moment. Tyler, as the board chair, and myself met with the education commissioner and our legislators. That was a goal that we had, and that certainly was very helpful in making sure that the commissioner and our legislators are aware of the distancing requirement and how that is difficult and challenging for school districts. Board resolution to the governor, Department of Education, and the CDC in removing the 3-foot distancing rules that are currently in place and will continue being in place, at least for the time being, unless the state changes its mind. So thank you to the board for that resolution that has gone up to the state. Additional modular classrooms, we have now gone ahead and leased it based on the previous board action at a previous meeting. The space study and square footage review using the 3-foot distancing has been completed, and there's links to all of those plans in the reopening plan. Hundreds of single desks have been ordered for distancing for classrooms. These were ordered quite a while back. At the primary school especially, we have a lot of tables. Kids were using tables and not desks in that school, as is more developmentally appropriate. But obviously, with the distancing requirement still of 3 feet, we needed to order single desks that can be put together for tables and become tables later on, so they can be used, for many years, not just during the next year. But we certainly needed to go ahead with that at the primary level, especially. 4 large tents and several benches, obviously, as you know, have been constructed, put up around the campus. Recently, last week, we were approved for a waiver that we put in order to be able to offer free breakfast and lunch again next year. We've been offering that basically since the pandemic hit back in March of last year. So I'm happy that we're able to move on that again. We've ordered 14,000 pieces of free PPE items, personal protection items, which are masks, gowns, shields, etc., at no charge. And we've just got on that early so that they wouldn't run out. And then finally, completed activity is bringing this draft forward this evening. So just to, again, I did go through this previously, but I just want to summarize. There's a lot of funding to support this plan. We have an additional $540,000 for instructional staff that was put into the general fund of the proposed FY22 budget, which the board has adopted. Additional 7 teachers, K through 8, are included in our SO3 money, which is $393,000. We're using all of that to support those 6 of those teachers. The 7th teacher is a reallocated position in the budget, which was the remote learning teacher at the elementary level. So that gives us our 7. And then we'll need to reallocate any additional teachers if necessary for next year. And that's a process that we'll continue going through and looking at class sizes. So a total investment of $935,000 in additional instructional staff between the general fund, federal funds. That's a pretty significant investment that we're making in making sure that students are getting the academic support, keeping our class sizes on the small side next year, and maintaining that 3-foot distancing that's still in place. We also have 11 additional modular classrooms, 10 that we have in additional classrooms that we'll be getting in June from Scalvi. We have 1 that we already are in possession of, and that's at the transportation facility. As you know, the transportation building is being remodeled, and it will be completed within 2 months or so. And that modular unit down at the transportation building will be moved up to the campus, give us 11 rooms. So that's $235,000 that we're using out of FY21 funds, year-end funds that we're anticipating that we'll be able to have, plus site work. ESSER2 funds, we also have ESSER2 funds available to us right now. And as you know, we're using that primarily to support a 0.8 nursing position, which is an additional position. We've had it this year, and we'd like to carry that through for 2 more years. And then finally, as Kevin mentioned earlier, and I've talked about earlier as well, $350,000 in access to emergency funds if needed, and this would have no tax impact. This comes out of our undesignated fund balance, and only if we need it. So just to give a comparison, I've had a lot of questions about use of federal monies. Most of the federal monies that we received expired back in December of 2020. Couldn't carry them forward. They were one-time projects. They weren't for staffing or other things beyond December 20th. The ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds are monies that we have available now. ESSER 2 really is a lot less money. We're using it for the nurse, supporting the nurse for 2 years. The ESSER 3 is the more significant amount of federal money that came out of the Biden administration, was passed by Congress. We're still awaiting receipt of those funds, but we received our allocation amount of $393,000. You can see a comparison with other districts who are also preparing reopening plans right now, and how they will be using those funds. So for example, Bedford is receiving $5.2 million in ESSER 3 funds. Lewiston's receiving $20.5 million in ESSER 3 funds. South Portland, $4.8 million. Westbrook, $7.6 million. Yarmouth is about in the same range as us, just a little bit more at $485,000. So you can see that we're on the very low end of the ESSER 3 funds. It's calculated using your Title I allocation. We get very small amount of Title I money in our district. And as a result, it's based on that. And that's why our ESSER 3 funds are not as high as others. So when we're talking about planning for next year and the amount of available money for plans, we are at a significant disadvantage. And that was something that the board chair and myself brought up in meeting with the commissioner and legislators, is that this is somewhat of an unfair process in divvying up those federal monies in the state and using the Title I formula to do that. Especially a district like ours that's overcrowded, those funds are not equitably distributed for these very unique needs that we have. So I think it's very important for me to just give you a picture of that and how we need, those funds and the amount that we're actually receiving. So this plan has 3 different pillars in it. Pillar 1 is health and safety. This plan continues to incorporate recommendations, obviously, from the CDC, MDOE, and the 6 requirements that the MDOE is making. In the most significant one, as I mentioned, is the 3-foot distancing between students in a classroom. Masks and social distancing will continue to be emphasized as the new school year begins. Daily self-screening, making sure that if students and staff are not feeling well, that they are not coming to school, really emphasizing that next year again. Tracking and noticing of COVID-19 cases. Our district has been tracking it on our website for a year now, and we notice every single case. We will continue doing that into the new school year. Contact tracing and quarantines will continue into the new school year. Hopefully that will be greatly reduced as more and more people become vaccinated. If a person is fully vaccinated, which means that they have gotten both shots of Pfizer or Moderna, and they're 2 weeks after the second shot, they do not have to quarantine anymore. And that's a CDC rule. Johnson & Johnson, it's 1 shot, 2 weeks after the 1 shot. So that's something that I think will significantly reduce the need to contact, trace, and quarantine in the fall. Obviously, staffing, we are adding teachers in order to make sure that we're maintaining the 3 feet. which reduces our class size and the need for more teachers in our district, along with more space needs, which we've put into this plan and into the budget. Pillar 2 is the instructional or academic highlights. Obviously, I've talked about the budget support. Curriculum adjustments around essential standards will be emphasized again. In many cases, those essential standards won't actually change. It's just that we'll be using those standards and ensuring that we're teaching more content next year, as is a typical year. But the skills and the standards are the critical piece, and we've done that legwork. Some of those standards might be adjusted depending on the content area or grade level. But for the most part, teachers have identified what students need to be leaving at a grade level or content area with at the end of the year. And we have a lot of links in our plan. I've also put them in this presentation, which we'll be making available to everyone as well. You can click on these links and go right to, for example, essential standards, and be able to see those for the district. Supporting students who have more needs beyond the regular curriculum, which is our response to intervention plan, which we already have in place. Obviously, we're tweaking that based on the fact that we might have more students that have more needs. We do believe that many students will be able to quickly, get into a groove with academics at the beginning of the school year, and probably will not need other support beyond that. Some of it is just adjusting our core curriculum itself, which we call Tier 1, which is curricular planning, and making sure all of our students have access to that. Some of our allied arts may have to make some scheduling adjustments, especially at the elementary level next year. And that's just in light of adding more classroom positions. In the budget, we have also added some allied arts time to some of our allied arts areas in order to help with that. But that's just something that we know is going to be an administrative, we'll need administrative attention in order to develop those schedules. And then recognizing that in-person learning is the most effective, we are really pushing for all of our students to come back in person next year. We realize that there might be an extraordinary circumstance where there might be a handful of students in our district that might still require some sort of remote programming, but we're not making that an optional situation like we did this year. That would be a team getting together involving the staff, the parents, and the administration of the school, and going through criteria and seeing if a particular student is absolutely in need of some sort of remote learning programming next year. But again, it's not an optional situation. It will be treated more like a Section 504 meeting where there's an actual need for a student to be involved. So we think this will be very, very limited to a very small group of students who absolutely need something beyond in person. I think our message to everyone is in-person learning is critical. We're reopening the school in September, all of our schools to 5 days. And we really need our students to return and be in school 5 days a week in the fall. And the third and final pillar is the mental health framework, recognizing that mental health continues to be very important. It's part of our current strategic plan. It's not something that is necessarily a derivative of the pandemic, although we know that in some cases the pandemic may have exacerbated that for some students. So making sure that we're just revisiting our mental health framework. Our mental health team has put a lot of work into making sure that our framework is current and up to speed for the fall. There are 3 tiers that we'll be looking at. One of them is Tier 1, which is all students, making sure that all students have some sort of access to enrichment, social emotional health, education around mental health concerns, coping skills, and resources. So each level has different ways of doing that, whether it's through guidance classes or through advisory but making sure that all of our students have access to that. Tier 2 is more targeted, small groups, individual students who require additional support in personal wellness and skill training in foundational skills, who've got some symptoms that would exhibit that, and they've been identified for a little bit more support. And then Tier 3 would be more intensive. And this is for a small group of students who require that extra assistance. And that's in line with what we have been doing anyway in our district. We're just making sure that we have our framework in place and that we're ready. For September, after an atypical year, make sure that we have these things in place for a more typical school year. So a day in the life for students coming back and staff in early September, following more typical in-person schedule with 5 days of school in most weeks, depending on the calendar. Continuing to look at a health screening, again, just making sure that students and staff are feeling well enough to come to school. Being dropped off by a parent, we're still asking parents to drop off and pick up if they can do that next year. Students that drive, obviously, and then students that don't have other transportation, obviously riding our buses with face coverings. Classroom desks, what's that? Classroom desks and tables are 3 feet apart in classrooms and instructional spaces. Making sure face coverings are worn except for eating. And then in outside situations, there might be times for students not to wear masks. Not to be confused with athletics. After school athletics, we have been allowing students not to wear masks when they are involved in some sort of vigorous activity. Lunch would be in the cafeteria. Again, we've been transitioning slowly back in some places to cafeteria eating, but also we're going to have to look at other designated places. We've looked at hallways and supervision there, and in some cases we might still have to do classrooms for lunch, but we are trying to transition back as much as possible to lunches in our cafeteria. It just will look different. Common areas being marked with 3-foot distancing and not 6 feet. Outdoor learning would still be strongly encouraged and supported. We've had a lot of students and staff on our campus out over the last few weeks. Regular access to athletics, after school programs, clubs, etc. should be resuming. A lot of that has started to resume, as you know. And then many of our field trips that a lot of students and staff look forward to, special programs, assemblies, will be resuming, but we'll have obviously restrictions, distancing that we have to look at, gathering limits, and more details about that can be found in the plan itself. So in progress, these are still some major activities that we're continuing to work on right now. And this really doesn't talk about all of the behind the scenes work that the administrators are doing in trying to get everything in place, such as hiring additional teachers, getting the space set up, assigning students. All of that stuff is, these are things behind the scenes. Some of that's on this list, but there's a huge amount of work that needs to go on with that. And we'll be, as a leadership team, spending the next couple months going through all those details at each of our meetings every week. COVID vaccine clinic, as we've announced, anticipating that we'll have that available for ages 12 and up on May 18th, with the second shot of Pfizer on June 8th. Weekly updates will continue through the rest of the school year, and probably at different points through the summer, we'll also be sending out those updates. An FAQ will be updated. We'll be continuing to develop the FAQ, and we'll be sending that out and making it available before school begins in August so that it's current. Assignment of students based on 3-foot distancing. Obviously, the administrators are working on that. We're doing a lot of hiring right now, as we do anyway at this time of year, but obviously we have a lot of additional hiring for additional classrooms. The modular setup, getting that squared away this summer. And transportation bus rooms and assignments, there will be some changes that we'll have to make in order to make transportation work smoothly, although we got great news about a week ago that a lot of our distancing requirements can be relaxed while students are on the bus, as long as there is fresh air, as we have been doing anyway. And finally, the nurses are setting up the Binax now testing. We still are waiting for that approval, and once we receive it, we'll be moving ahead with that. Almost done. How can people support the plan? Working for MSAD 51, we have 8 vacant educational technician openings. We filled one last week, so we're now down to 8. So we're hiring for the fall. These are all in special education. We've had ads going out for a few weeks now. We'd love to have, you know, if parents have an opportunity to work and they like a school year schedule, we'd love to have them consider us. Supporting the budget. As Kevin mentioned earlier, with all of the changes that we've made and all the support, especially instructional support for next year, we've been very creative on how this impacts taxpayers, knowing that this has been a very difficult year for families, community members, and just over 1% tax impact in Cumberland and just under 1% in North Yarmouth. This is an incredibly responsible fiscal budget for all of the things that we're putting in place to support our students and staff for next year. Supporting the new building project that will, the board decides to put it forward for a November vote is critical. We have overcrowded buildings, and I say buildings plural. Mabel I. Wilson School and the middle school are now overcrowded. And you will see a lot more portables, partly for distancing and partly for enrollment, going up over the summer. We are in need of a new school building. I don't think that point could be made any more clear, and I think we have to just keep saying it over and over. Our enrollment issues are not going away, and we need to plan for the future. And finally, and so many people have been doing this, and I think it's really lifted the morale of our staff in hearing how appreciated they are. Our administrators, I would like to include, obviously, the board, and just giving kudos and thanks to everyone who's made this difficult year a little bit easier with all the efforts that have gone into it. So thank you to so many people who have been sending well wishes. It's been amazing to see that. So next steps would be, we are planning to send the plan out this week, within the next couple of days, actually, the full plan, plus this presentation. Plus there will be a feedback survey, which is being finalized, that we're asking stakeholders to please consider filling out if they have feedback that they'd like to give us, questions, concerns, whatever is on their mind. Please let us know, and we will have a deadline for accepting that so that we can consider it as part of this plan. Public input on the reopening plan will be May 24th at 6:30 p.m. Staff input, there will be a separate staff input session just for staff. We have not scheduled it yet, but it will be within the next 2 weeks. And there will be a board vote, obviously, as you know, on the reopening plan scheduled for June 7th at 6:30. So that's almost a month that this plan will be out in the public for review, for comments, for questions, for considerations before the board is taking a vote on the plan. And the final slide. Thought this would be important to say. I've been asked it, and actually I gave this answer to a couple of people who have asked recently. My final thoughts are, our district has always worked in the very best interest of all of our students, even when people may disagree with those decisions. We have placed great value on student learning from pre-kindergarten through graduation, and we've done so with academic clarity, careful planning, hiring only the most talented teachers and staff, and providing outstanding learning experiences for all students. And this is something that we've been doing for years and years. This is nothing new. This year, despite the limitations of the pandemic, this has been no different. It's no accident that Greeley High School has been named #1 high school in Maine for 2 years in a row, even during a pandemic. And this honor extends to all of our students, staff, and families, pre-K through grade 12. It takes an entire school community to reach that kind of honor. We have focused on quality, not quantity, when students have attended school in person this year. We look forward to the beginning of a new school year in September, when both quality and quantity of in-person learning days will resume in a more typical schedule and fashion. I would ask for everyone's continued support of our outstanding schools and their indisputable reputation for excellence in all areas. Academics, the arts, athletics. Our district has always been very high performing and will continue to be high performing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. That was a great way to close that. I guess at this point, we will open up to the board for questions and comments. This will be, like Jeff said, the first but not the last time that we will look at this before we vote on it. And so I just want to open it up to the board for initial questions now, as we will be, again, looking at this on the 24th. So I see Kate Perrin's hand.
So I spent a good part of today reviewing this. Thank you for putting this in our board packets. I think it looks really comprehensive. It looks very similar to the plan that we have been working off of if we were to have been able to go into the green section. So I appreciate the detail and the updates that were given to this plan. So I have a couple of questions. I'll go through them quickly. So yay for the late bus resuming. I think that's really important to make sure our students can access a whole round of some of the extracurricular that has been really missing for them this year. So thank you. I would like to see a commitment that every grade 5 through 12, it is live streaming, not be choice. I think it needs to be mandatory. I think, if we were to be in red, and I'm hoping that we're not, but I think the live streaming thing has been really amazing, but it's also been really hard for people who have a large cluster of teachers who have decided not to use it. So live streaming, not optional. I don't know if there's been any conversation about that. I would like the board to have some input in the COVID staff handbook. The board handles staff negotiations, and that feels very much like something to me that the board should be discussing and reviewing as a board as well with the union reps. I think the seating plans are great work on that. And I think we need to revisit our district physician position again. I feel very strongly about that. I'm not gonna let go of that one. I need somebody who is reviewing pediatric science, who's reviewing in-school transmission data, giving us, meta-analysis on that sort of thing. So that is what I had. And then the other thing, parent volunteers. I understand having people from the same geographical area. I think that's smart, but parents want to be in the building. They want to have some sense of normalcy with their students. And if we can do that safely, if the parent's vaccinated, if they're wearing a mask, I'd hope that we can find a way to make that work. So those are my thoughts. I guess so. My question is about the live streaming. Do we plan to make that mandatory for all staff if we were to go into red grades 5 through 12?
Yes, Kate, these are all good points and good questions. Yes, in the plan in the red section, there is a statement that we changed. It's in the red ink that says that if we're in red, that is a requirement that we would be live streaming grades 6 through 12, which is where the equipment is. But I can go through different points, but I think just getting a kind of a list of points that we are made tonight, I think is very helpful from the board so that we can start considering some of these things in the plan as we're moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Great work, everyone. I know this was a big lift and there's so much thoughtful work being done. I can't wait to drop my kids off 5 days a week.
We'll go to Mike Williams and then Jennifer Stewart. Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll keep it quick. It's similar to Kate. I read this earlier today, and it's pretty darn comprehensive. Feeling good about it, and flows very directly with what we've been working on for a while. One, just to say it out loud, even though you said this, Jeff, just making sure that we do go back to tables for younger kids, even like the desks pushed together. I get that, but just the notion of kids sitting in separate desks at younger grades. But I know that you're already planning on doing that. I just would feel weird not saying it out loud. And then just two quick questions. Just to clarify, we're planning on going back to effectively what we were doing before with special ed integration. So I know with the different cohorts, and specifically with the cohort seed was really hard and integration was really difficult in COVID, but starting in September, hopefully that will go back to where kids who are in specialized classes, where they used to be integrated into with the rest of the school, we'll be going back to that.
Yes, that is our goal, is to do that. Now, there might be circumstances where that's not able to happen, or there might be extenuating circumstances with medical issues or concerns that we'll have to still look at. But generally speaking, that is our goal. And I want to see if Julie has anything else she wanted to add to that.
No, I mean, certainly we would be following IEPs and integrating students based on their least restrictive environment through their IEPs. We have been doing that this year through Google Meets, but our intent would be to do that in person, certainly.
Awesome, thank you. And one final question, just noting it's sort of a broad question. So when distancing requirement drops, especially once we get past that 70% mark of our state population, when our kids, hopefully in September, younger than 11, younger than 12, are going to start getting vaccinated, as the estimate is coming out, that will change quite a bit. Yes. With distancing changes, that changes lunchroom eating, that changes obviously classroom how we situate our classrooms, changes how we space kids on buses, not spacing them, so on and so forth. So that's just sort of a broad question, that once those distancing requirements drop, because I have to think they will at some point, that will change a lot from here, or it will ease up a lot. Yes?
I would think so. I mean, that would be up to the CDC and MDOE to give us that. We're counting on the fact, and we planned for the fact that 3-foot distancing is in place for the year. So I hope it's not the year, but the plan is for the year. And even if the state decided to ease up on the distancing in September, for example, obviously we're committed to keeping all of our classes the way they're assigned for September. I think if nothing else, smaller class sizes or slightly smaller class sizes next year will be really important for academic, for social reasons, et cetera. And I think that, regardless, obviously we're not going to, if the state dropped those distancing requirements in September, we wouldn't all of a sudden say, let's reassign kids and, reduce our teachers. I think there's a twofold benefit to smaller class sizes. Obviously, we're meeting the requirement, which is 3 feet in the classrooms, but the second one is to create smaller class sizes for all students. And that's, a huge benefit for everyone in making sure that we're focusing on those academic skills next year throughout the entire year. So the plan is built on an entire year of 3 feet distancing. If we don't have to worry about the distancing because the state drops that, then we're in great shape. But we will be adhering to that, at least at this point, and this plan is based on that.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you for saying that too. The significant benefits of the smaller class sizes, that is a wonderful thing, and I really appreciate you saying that. Even if the distancing's dropped in August, September, we'll stick with that for the year. I love that.
Thank you, Mike. Jennifer?
Okay. I guess the first comment I just wanted to make was thank you, Jeff and Scott, for moving forward with the question that I had at our last board meeting about quarantining. It seems like since we came back from spring break and the change in the quarantine rules and the work that the nurses have done, we've had very little quarantines. And the messaging, I think, is important that you're sending out on how many people could have been affected and kind of you breaking it down. And I've had some feedback personally from people saying how much they appreciated that because their own kid was in a room, then they got kind of, it got broken down and they didn't have to quarantine, and what a benefit that was, that they were able to continue to do sports and go to school. So thank you for that. I know it's a lot of work. My questions kind of on the reopening plan or statements are, when I went through it earlier, is one, I was wondering if we could rename it. I know it's kind of nitpicky. It just sounds kind of icky that we're reopening since we have been open and open for business this year. And, I hope I can say that my kids went to school this year. And I hope they get credit for this school year. God, I hope I don't have to go through 8th grade again with my son, please. So anyways, I don't know, the name just sounds weird, and I know it's minor, but one thing is with putting 11 modulars onto our campus, what is that going to do with playground space and field space and traffic pattern? Do we have, obviously you've already looked at it and Scott knows that we have the room for that, but what are we giving up? And I think people should be aware of that with the governor restricting the 3-foot distancing, it's taking away, it's financially, it's burdening our community, but it's also, it has to take away from other things with open space or playground space or things like that at all the schools, I would imagine. And I don't know who best would speak to that, if it's Scott or if that's Jeff.
Yeah, I can jump in and then Scott can, if he has more detail. Basically, the modulars will be situated, the additional modulars will be situated at the Wilson School and at the middle school at this time. That's where we're going to be placing those. So that's where we need the space. So at the Wilson School, they'll be going out into the field, which is adjacent to where the modular unit is right now. So we will be, our plan all along, obviously for enrollment reasons, was to add a section of 2 classrooms into the existing unit that's there, making that into a 10 classroom unit for next year. And that was purely because of enrollment that we had to do that. So now we're adding 4 additional classrooms, 2 more units onto the Mabel Wilson grounds, which will be behind that unit going into the field. So it will be taking up some of the field space where kids are playing. At the middle school, it will be on the far end by the softball, what is known as the softball area at the middle school, and there will be 5 classrooms there, and I'm missing 2, Scott. I think you're gonna have to clue me in on where those other 2 are.
Yes, we decided not to put the modular at the high school. We're going to bring it down to the middle school. So the middle school will have the majority of the modulars, 2 at the elementary school. And as far as the taking up of space, the ball field, we're looking at taking up the infield area on the ball field next to Mabel I. Wilson School, which will affect some of the baseball, little league, things like that. Sally, did you want to weigh in on, we had a conversation today about the playground at MIW that I think would be important for people to hear.
Well, sure. Thanks, Scott. We were pleased to be working with Scott today as one of our teachers had written a Foundation 51 grant for some creative equipment to really make the playground space that is available more functional for students. So more play space with, outdoor kitchens for kids' imaginative play. And then having some stations like a balance beam and steps and hanging bars to go around the perimeter inside the ball field to encourage children to move around the ball field and use the space differently, more like a parkour, but just trying to think through what will engage kids to get out in the field that is available around the portables and make the best use of that space. And thanks to Margaret Brown and Foundation 51, I think we have some resources to get started with. And Margaret was thrilled to speak to Scott and just start to think through what we could be flexible and creative with. So I think we got the right mindset to make the best of the space that we do have.
Yeah. And over to the middle school, we're going to basically be taking up the softball field. Marie, I don't know if you and Carol want to talk to that because you've had conversations around those modulars and space over there with Doug Breer.
Yeah, they're going on that back field, and that's intentional to be able to maintain as much playground space as possible. We have a lot of students, and they need to run around at recess. And so, but Carol and I have not discussed how we're parsing out those spaces as yet. That's work that we need to still do together.
Thank you. I think that takes care of the questions on the modular. Everybody's all set on that one. So.
Okay. And Scott, I would imagine those at the middle school, it's probably going to go back onto the middle school field hockey field also, kind of backing up there.
Yes, it will. Yeah. And I had some conversations with David about him doing some relocation of things. And, you know, we're in the middle of having those conversations now.
Okay. And maybe fences have to move or something. So.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sure. For instance, like the backstop at Mabel I. Wilson School, that's going to have to come down. And I'm sure there'll be some other fencing and things that we'll have to do too.
Right. It's not going to feel good to kind of take that stuff away. I know that it has to happen, but you know, or taking the kickball field away at MIW is, you know, a big bummer, but that's where we are. So
1 year and then we'll try to move them on. So.
Right. Exactly. Okay. I guess I have a couple other questions, Jeff, or comments would be is when we vote on the plan in June, would it look similar to in the same kind of format that you're looking at right now in this draft format, or will it be more in detail, or do you envision it in any different way?
I think the plan will mostly, Jennifer, be the same as what you're looking at. What we tried to do this time is to consolidate a lot of the plan into links at the end of the plan. So there's a lot of information. It's very information heavy at the end of the plan, but they're in links. And that was something I debated going back and forth in trying to think about, should we put that right into the plan itself, which would, you know, lengthen the plan, or should we make that information linkable? So I kind of decided to go, you know, make it linkable and have a little bit shorter of a plan for people to access if they wanted to. So that was kind of more of a formatting piece, but I don't expect or anticipate a huge change in the plan, except based on feedback that we receive between now and the time the board votes. I'd like to put the plan out and say that, you know, this is largely what it looks like. We're looking for input that might help clarify. I've already heard some things tonight that I think would be helpful to be a little bit more explicit in the plan. And that's certainly, you'll see that. And if there's any changes, there will be changes, I know. Between now and June 7th, we'll even put it in a different ink. I think that helps the board to just, you know, see the red ink that you're looking at in the plan is the difference between the current plan and next year. And then I think any feedback that we receive would be, you know, from this date going forward to June 7th, you'll be able to see that feedback or input or changes that are made in a different color ink so that you can, when you're voting, you'll know what you're voting on and what's changed. I don't know if that helps, but, you know, we wanted to make sure this plan was largely intact when we put it out to the public without any huge surprises that we don't know about. We're trying to anticipate. It doesn't mean that something might not come up that needs to be included in the plan between now and June 7th that we're not aware of. But most of the large things that we looked at and thought about and that we've reviewed are in this plan.
That does help. Thank you, Jeff. And my last comment would be is I would encourage us to include something in the plan that includes how the large technology investment that we had this year will be used next year. And not necessarily just around us being in red, but how we're going to reap those benefits of the, you know, the high dollars that we invested in it. And I know some of it is just, you know, the hardware and things like that, but I just hope that we can stay focused and use that going forward also. And I don't know what I envision with that, but really just making sure that we still have our hands on that. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Peter.
Jeff, to clarify on the calendar, we have set the 2021-2020 calendar. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's based on, yes, you're right, Peter. So it's based on the calendar that you've already approved.
because I think, I mean, it's out there in the community already that this Back to 5 group is going to be starting to push for full 5-day weeks, aka Wednesdays. So I think it's important right at the outset that the calendar for and the days and everything for the next school year have already been set and approved by the board, and the earliest that anything would be looked at would be next year. But I think just for everybody's information and edification, that this is going to get ramped up again, and I don't think it's going to go away as quickly as it might have the last time. But I think it's important to note, at least for this year, that we set the calendar. But just be aware that the wave is coming again.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that it has certainly come in waves. People's interest in looking at this topic again. Obviously, we had a committee that worked over a year on this. Recently, we did consider, as the board knows, we did consider possible, adding days in or times in for all students to beginning interventions, on certain Wednesdays instead of going home. All those things were looked at, and in the end, obviously, we recommended a calendar that was more typical. So I'm not surprised that the issue has come up. I've heard it as well. I think at this point, again, we are planning on starting the year with a calendar that was approved 2 months ago almost by the board, and we need to move ahead with the plan now. If there are people that want to consider a different kind of calendar again, they would need to bring that up with the board in order to be reviewing it for the 22-23 school year. But as far as I'm concerned, it's late to be talking about next year's school calendar. That's been out for a while now, and we certainly are moving ahead with it.
Well, it's kind of like Dracula, they've never killed him yet.
Thank you, Peter. I don't see any other hands up. I do have a few questions, and I'll just jump in. I was happy to see that outdoor learning was listed on this and that we are supporting it. I hope that, like Jennifer mentioned, that we can also highlight how we are utilizing the funds that we spent on outdoor learning, and showing how we are supporting that for the amphitheater, for the various outdoor seatings that we've done. I'm just hoping that we can show how those funds are being used effectively with this plan for next year. And then one of the things that I continue to hear is, or a big concern about what this plan or how this plan is going to help our students catch up. And I know that's a big question. And how are we going to make sure that if everybody's showing up at different levels on day one, how are we really, do we have enough to make sure that we are getting students what they need? So I wonder if there's a way to highlight like the top 3 things that this plan provides to support students with that extra need that I think all students are going to have in one way or another when they show up in September.
Yeah, I think the word catch up obviously is something that's been put out there nationally. It's not a local piece, and just a concern and worry that students are somehow behind academically. And I do think we have to, all remember that kids learn at different paces anyway. Even in a very typical year, all students learn at in different ways and at different paces, different rates. That's why we have response to intervention. And for, the vast majority of our students, tier 1 interventions, which are right in the classroom, right in the regular classroom with teachers working with all students. Those are generally core curricular changes, being responsive to the curriculum in the moment and in the classroom is very important. And that's tier 1. And that's for all students benefiting from, curricular changes. And that can be all down to the moment where a teacher says, this lesson isn't working. for the kids in front of me right now, and I need to throw it out. And all of our teachers who are very skillful at doing that will know that, and they throw it out and they go back and say, let's review this skill again. Obviously, we need to do that before we move on to this thing. That's tier one. That's interventions in the moment, and that's for all kids. And of course, we'll be doing that like we do in any typical year during those first, 6 to 8 weeks. Teachers are assessing and reviewing and making sure students are where they should be. As Sally Laughlin likes to say, and I 100% agree with her, is that instruction works. It's amazing how many kids learn when they are properly instructed by our teachers. I mean, they do well, they gain. It's amazing what they'll absorb. And, I believe, and I know our teachers and our administrators are going to make sure that kids are where they need to be. And I don't think any student, we have to worry about them catching up, before day one or trying to catch up. I think that's the phrase that I wouldn't want to use. For students that, and again, in any typical year, who need extra support, we have tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. Tier 2 interventions that they need a little extra support, whether it's in or out of the classroom. They just need a little bit extra, need some attention from another adult who might be able to provide that support. And tier 3 is they need a lot of attention, and that's a very small group of kids. So the vast majority of our students do, well with those tier 1 in the moment curricular changes that we make, in the classroom on a day-to-day basis. Our teachers, one of the important things about Wednesday afternoons that I want to say in our district, and I think this is one of the reasons that we academically are strong in our district, is that teachers collaboratively work together across the board to make sure that our curricular expectations are consistent and that the kind of learning experiences that we offer to kids is consistent and at high levels. That cannot happen when teachers are isolated all week long and don't have those abilities to be collaborative. Our administrators are creative in finding other ways for teachers to collaborate, but those Wednesday afternoons are critical for doing that. And I do believe that that is one of the reasons our district has been so high performing, is that our teachers are on par with each other in making sure that our curriculum at the tier 1 level is high performing and consistent. So I don't know if that answers your question, Tyler, but that kind of gives you a snapshot of where we'll be beginning the year.
No, it was perfect, because my follow-up question was going to be, for those that are concerned about that half-day Wednesday, how are we utilizing those to show that we're supporting the needs, both of our staff and of our students? So great. It was a great answer, because it answered my next question anyway. I don't think I have any more written down, at least right now, that others haven't asked. So I didn't know if there's anyone else from the board that has any questions. Margot.
I'll turn on my mic this time. I think I just wanted to piggyback on what you were just saying, Tyler and Jeff, that how parents are feeling about their children and where they are will not necessarily be where teachers are feeling like those same students are. And I feel like we need to express trust in the system, that the teachers are going to be ready for wherever students are, and that there's a lot in place. So I think it's going to be a great year. Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to add, our administrators have done an amazing job making sure that those supports have been in place this year. In a year when we need all available hands on deck, there has still been, even when we've been in, red areas or red days or whatnot, or short staffed, that might be, a day or two or even a week. But our administrators have made sure that those supports for RTI have continued throughout the year. It's not like we put that on hold for a year and, some students might be getting more support when they're at home remotely with a staff member. They might be getting more support in school when they're here, and they might be invited back for cohort C as they are. Those are things that have been going on since the beginning of the school year for the students who need it the most. And again, I think, parents, I'm a parent too, we worry about our own kids a lot. We always think, are they where they need to be? I thank Margot for saying that, trust the teachers to be able to give give parents that information. And they will certainly be, straight with parents and let them know if they need that extra support. And they've been doing that this year too. It's not like we've waited a year and then we'll say something. That's something that's happened all year.
Thank you, Margot and Jeff. It also just is making me think that it might be, maybe this is something that's already been brought up, but knowing that there's a lot of anxiety around having our children return to school. I know as a parent, I'm wondering what's my son going to show up as, or what's my daughter going to show up as? How are they going to do that? I wonder if there might be some interest in doing parent check-ins maybe earlier in the year so that parents can have a better idea before like the initial parent-teacher conference, which I think is kind of further in to the school year. So I wonder if that might be helpful as well, because I'm guessing there'll be a lot of parents asking how their children are doing. Anyway, just a thought that came from the conversation. Any other discussion?
I'd just like to point out and thank Tyler and Margot and the Communications Committee for taking on the feedback portion of the plan. That is a huge lift. And it's an important lift. And I want to thank, all of you as part of the Communications Committee for helping with that. That's going to be an important component. We ask parents that if you have feedback, that you, please make sure you fill out the feedback form that will be coming out this week.
Thank you, Jeff. And just to make a note, I think in your presentation, it notes it as a survey. It's not a survey. It is a form to send feedback on, just so we're clear. That can get a little tricky sometimes. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for that presentation. It's great to have the first look at that draft plan. So thank you very much. Before we move on, I wanted to loop back to public comment to see if there was anybody waiting for public comment.
He was here for a minute. I think he had to go. I'll make sure he knows he can contact you.
Yes, that would be great. Okay. And then I wanted to loop back to recognition because I believe Elias is still with us. Elias, are you still with us? Yes, says you are. Maybe we'll wait. Okay. All right, Jeff, I believe you do not have a superintendent's report because you just did a reopening plan.
Yeah, no report this time.
Okay, fair. And then we'll move into committee reports. Finance, I'm guessing, Kevin, did you want to give another report?
I can start again if you'd like, but other than that, no, I think we're good.
Okay, great. Policy, we do have 2 first reads in our packet tonight. Anne, who usually reports on policy, is not with us tonight. So I encourage the board to look at those first reads, send back any feedback to Anne, and then we will look at those again when we are together, I believe on the 24th. Unless there's anything, I know Corey, you are part of the policy committee and you're right on my screen. So I'm asking if there's anything you wanted to mention before I moved on. Okay, great. So please take a look at those 2 policies. They, again, are in your packet with red marks noting the changes. Facilities, Peter.
Well, we're going on about 3 or 4 different tracks. Track 1 is that the finance committee and Scott are meeting with the bond council to put together and looking at stuff, looking at various borrowing plans, borrowing schedules, and such. So that's kind of track 1. Track 2 is that Oak Point is continuing to again fine tune the overall plan and fine tune the numbers that go with it. Third track again is we will be working with Oak Point and the facility committee to integrate the turf field into the overall plan. So I would, we'll obviously have some facilities meetings between now and the next couple of weeks. And I suspect by late May that we're going to have some preliminary numbers and more solid plans for the total plan that would include the pre-K 1 school, the Wilson renovations, any site plan changes, and also the turf field. And I also believe that now that we're a little further down the road, that we'll have some sessions with the town planner in the town of Cumberland, now that it looks like we've pretty much nailed down the traffic pattern. And I think we probably need to come to a decision on where we're going to put the superintendent's office. But I think we determined at the last facilities meeting that we don't have to do the bells and whistles that we'd planned on before. So things are working along, and I think we've got the major big picture stuff done. Now we've got to get some numbers and get that out to the public. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Peter. Margot, your hand is up. Did you have a question? Nope. Okay. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Curriculum, I don't believe we have a report. I'm seeing none. And this will flow into our recognitions. Our student reports. Elias.
Okay, so I guess in terms of the senior update, we are currently in AP and IB exams, so that's definitely a weird it's a bit surreal to think about studying, particularly for IB, studying for a 2-year class and having that test be the last sort of material that you'll ever have in, say, or it's definitely, I think, across the board, I think a sentiment among seniors, especially in a year like this, it's so weird to have everything sort of coming to a close when all we've known is just 2 days a week of school. And obviously it's just the result of the pandemic. So I think there have definitely been some moments of sort of melancholy sadness thinking about just the moments of the class of 2021 sort of fleeting and being in their sort of last stretch. But I think nonetheless, definitely there's so many cool sort of bonding activities going on. Like there's a senior movie tomorrow, and there was the high five for Mr. Hoffman in the hallway, and all of those were just really cool sort of send-offs for the seniors as spring approaches. And spring sports are going really well, and it's just, I think overall, the mood is high and with the increasing weather, but I guess just particularly from a senior's perspective, it's a bit in highs for sure.
Thank you, Elias. So earlier, while you were wrapping up your game, I'm guessing, we had recognition for you, and we held that for now because you are graduating. And so we all just wanted to take a moment to say thank you. I know personally, I feel extra heavy for your class because the past 2 years has been really hard for you all. And I want to say that I personally appreciate how you've been honest and how you have been so genuine with your experience and also kind of representing the other voices in your class. And I also just want to say that you have always tried to find a positive spin to some really difficult things. And I hope you never lose that. I hope that's something that is always part of who you are. So thank you so much. I believe that there is a gift on your doorstep from the district. It's a new thing we're doing now since we can't be together. We're surprise delivering things. And I want to say thank you to Fran at the central office for help organizing that. So I'll open it up to anyone else that wants to say thank you. But Elias, best of luck. I am so excited to hear what happens next for you. Anyone just chime in.
I'd just like to go that Elias and I started on the board at the same time 2 years ago. And, you know, he was so fun and really open and gave us some great insight right from the beginning of the high school, which I didn't know a lot about at Greeley. And you really keep it real and you're engaged in school and you just do so much and bring so much to the board and to the community. And, you know, there's so much positive around you. So best of luck and you are going to go far. So thank you.
Elias, just curious, have you finalized your plans for next year?
So yeah, I got accepted into Tufts ED2 in I think early February. That was, it feels so weirdly long ago at this point. But I think moving, so that's ED2 kind of locks me into going to Tufts, which is really exciting. But I think moving forward, I think I'm taking a gap year next year, which will look probably like working construction and living at home for the first portion of the year, and then traveling abroad, hopefully in some Central American country, with hopes of becoming fluent in Spanish and just experiencing a new culture. So I'm really excited to have the at-home. I'll see all the implementation of the return to school, and obviously Tommy's gonna sophomore next year, so I'll still have that really connection. And I think it's just me. It's nice to not have sort of the bite the bullet leave for college so soon and just have it delayed one more year. So that's very exciting.
Well, it's the same way I've followed your sister's career. I'm going to keep an eye on you too. You know, I like to see certain Greeley grads and what they've done with themselves, and it's kind of the thing that makes the service on the school board and all this stuff what it is, when we can see what's going on. And I look back at those kids that I gave their diplomas back in 1989 and 1990 and what they're doing. It just it makes it all worthwhile. So I'll be watching you.
Thank you so much. And I think, I don't know, I was going to wait till the end to say this, but I guess there's no better time than now. But I think just the past 2 years on the board have been, I think, probably, not that I'd want to claim this title for myself, but potentially some of the two most tumultuous years you could have asked for as a student rep. And I think I've seen how you guys have just worked tirelessly to really make school the best it can possibly be for the students, and just seeing that perspective. I think a student rep position in any given year is valuable insight into this, but this year particularly, obviously the hours have been more than what you would maybe anyone had signed up for, but everyone on the board and just the district in general has taken that call with the pandemic and just everything in stride. And I think there's really, it's sad to see the division within the community driven by a lot of ignorance and the sort of faulting the administrators rather than just the pandemic to begin with. But I think it's just been, I've been really proud to see the student body valued so highly throughout just all of the work, and seeing that firsthand as a student rep on the board. So thank you all so much for making these 2 years such a growing experience, and just 2 years and just perspective I'll never forget as I move on.
Well, you did such a good job that the group didn't try to recall you, so feel good about that.
I'm honored. I don't know if there was some like legal regulations as far as that, but you're right.
Anyone else? Go ahead if you'd like to say something.
I would, Tyler. Elias, it has been great having you on the board, and seeing you evolve over the past couple of years, and it's been noticeable. And you have done yourself and certainly your family very, very proud. And your insight is always valued, and I can't wait to see what you do next. I think that you've just put a ton of pressure on Tommy, but that's okay too. And look forward to seeing your next steps. Be well.
Thank you so much.
Elias, I just wanted to say, I've known your mom for a really long time, but I didn't know you. And when I was on the committee that was interviewing all of, I think there were like 6 or 8 people in your class that applied for that position. And each person was so great and so enthusiastic, but you really stood out, and I was rooting for you all along. And I think I'll give myself a little pat on the back. I know how to pick them. You have been awesome. You tell us stuff, not always what we want to hear, but you just put it out there. And I think that if students watch any of the school board meetings, I think that they would feel like you were really speaking for them. I don't know them, but maybe they do. But I'll just really miss you. And I think that your spirit has been really strong, and having you understand how hard this year has been for us really means a lot, because it has been thankless a lot of the time. And I can only speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure everyone on the board really, really cares about the students and the staff and making things the best they can be. So having your thanks really means a lot. And I'm glad you're going to be around a little bit next year. Hopefully we'll be able to get together and debrief a little bit. But good luck with the rest of your very few days as a Greeley undergrad.
And yeah, I'll definitely miss you guys as well. I think couldn't have asked for a greater two, and I guess I'm just overcome with emotion right now, just thinking about this being the kind of the finality of everything. But I guess I always try and live by the quote, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. And the 2 years have definitely been as great as I could have asked for, despite the just unforeseen circumstances.
Elias, thank you so much for your 2 years that you've given. I know being a student, you have to balance a lot. You're obviously involved in athletics a lot. You're always at some competition and obviously academics, and then with COVID, and then balancing this with all of it and homework, and just to really appreciate all of your time. And I'll just kind of reiterate what others have said, but you just always have the positive spin on everything. And I think that's a lifelong trait. That's a lifelong skill. And that's something that just honestly carry that with you all the way, because it makes such a difference. And it makes a difference not just for you, but for everyone around you. And I know I've been influenced by that, and I really appreciate it, especially over the last few months that have been more challenging, hearing from different people, but always appreciate your perspective. It's just always, it's very honest, but also has a real positive spin to it. And it's really wish you a lot of luck, and we'll miss you on the board, Elias. Big shoes to fill.
Thank you so much. Means the world.
I don't want to pile on, but I will pile on just to say that we're a better board because of you, and you're definitely a great role model. I've got a 5th grader behind me saying how she wants to serve on the board as a student, just hearing you. So thank you for everything.
Thank you, Elias. We will miss you. Stay in touch.
For sure. Thank you. I guess there just aren't enough times that I can say thanks, but I'll dearly miss this experience. But then being home next fall, I think, will open up hopefully opportunities to just watch the meetings and just be active in the life of a school board as well. So thank you so much for everything.
I'm glad we were able to do that. I was worried we weren't going to be able to say those things. So I'm glad that worked out. All right. Moving on into items for action. The first item we have is to approve continuing teacher contracts for 2021-2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Peter.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. All right. We'll do a roll call. Peter Bingham.
Yes.
Kevin Desmond.
Yes.
Margot Harrington.
Yes.
Tyler McGinley, yes. Kate Perrin has left. Jennifer Stewart.
Yes.
And Mike Williams.
Yes.
And Elias, I'm sorry, that was a strange, Elias Leggett Barr.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just saw a comment about a student. Madison is not with us tonight.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Tyler. I couldn't see that.
No problem. All right. So moving on, we are looking for a motion for to approve probationary teacher contracts for 2021-22.
So moved.
And a second.
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 Thank you. All right. Peter Bingham, or I'm sorry, any discussion?
Just one, Madam Chair. Jeff, could you just explain what this means?
Sure. What you just voted on was the continuing contracts, and those are teachers that have, right now, the state law is still in effect for this group, which is 3 years of probationary status, which means that they get a little bit more visits from administrators, a little bit more attention, making sure they're acclimating because they're new to our district. So they're probationary for 3 years, and then they go on to continuing contract status with a recommendation of the administrator and then my nomination to the board. And then for the probationary folks, they are in their first either year or 2 years, and they'll be moving on to a either second or third year of probationary time. Then the state law did change so that we're now not doing 3 years of probationary anymore. It's back to 2. But that's what you're approving tonight, either probationary status continuing or continuing, or probationary folks at the end of their probationary period going into a continuing contract status.
Thank you. That was less about the board understanding, but anybody playing along at home, I just wanted that to be clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. All right. Peter Bingham.
Yes.
Kevin Desmond.
Yes.
Margot Harrington.
Yes.
Tyler McGinley, yes. Jennifer Stewart.
Yes.
Mike Williams.
Yes.
And Elias Leggett Barr.
Yeah, I might.
Thank you. All right. Moving on, I'm looking for a motion to vote to approve the hiring of administrative positions, the GHS interim principal. So we'll seek a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and discussion. Jeff, do you want to speak to this at all, or Kevin? Go ahead.
Not speak to it. So maybe Jeff, you can make the introduction, and then I would like to speak.
Yes, I'm pleased to nominate to the board this evening, as you know, Don Gray, who is the assistant principal at the high school. Nominating him to become the interim principal for the 21-22 school year. At this point, we have advertised in advance of this vote for an interim assistant principal who would fill Don's position for the year next year. And assisting him in leading the high school. So that's what this nomination is going forward. I have all confidence in Mr. Gray's abilities and connections and relationships at the high school, that this will make for a smooth transition in leadership as Mr. Hoffman is moving on.
Go ahead, Kevin.
You used almost the same words that I would have, Jeff, which is great at 8:59. Mr. Graham, I'm glad to see the consistency in your succession into this. I think your background obviously equips you so well for this. you have that reputation for your enthusiasm, being very fair-minded, and I'm very glad that you're able to step into this role.
I just want to say thank you again to Dawn, and I also just, like we said, I think a meeting or so ago, about the assistant principal at the 6-8 level. I'm just glad that we were able to keep some consistency for our students and staff, and really grateful, Dawn, that you are willing to step into this position. And of course, it's bittersweet. Chris, we are sad to lose you, but I'm really glad that we are able to work within what we have, and I'm excited to see what happens next year. All right. Any other discussion? Okay. Peter Bingham?
Yes.
Kevin Desmond?
Yes.
Margot Harrington?
Yes.
Tyler McGinley, yes. Jennifer Stewart?
Yes.
Mike Williams?
Yes.
And Elias Leggett-Barr?
But also no. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, and then our last item for action is to vote to approve the hiring of professional positions. And I believe we can take both of these at the same time with the same motion.
Tyler?
Yes.
It looked like someone just raised their hand. Did you see that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Don, go ahead.
That's okay, Tyler. I just want to thank the board and Superintendent Porter for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I also want to recognize and thank Chris Hoffman. Chris is his deep care, commitment to this, this community, the faculty and the staff and the students is unparalleled. I've got some big shoes to fill next year for sure. And he continues to work hard to ensure, we're successful next year. And I just look forward to working, with the board, faculty, and staff to ensure our students continue to have opportunities and success. So I just want to thank everyone, and especially Chris for all I've learned from him. And I wish him well.
Thank you very much. It's hard. This is a weird motion because we're approving one. We haven't really done an official recognition of you, Chris. So thank you, Don, for saying that. And Chris, you will be missed greatly. And thank you for all you're doing, Chris, for the end of the year as well. I know it's a lot. It's a big push. Okay. All right. So do I have a motion to vote to approve the hiring of professional positions?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
I have one question. Just, I believe that one of the positions is because of a teacher reassignment, I think, Jeff, and just to explain that, whether they're just moving from first grade into another grade and kind of what that shift is.
Yeah, every year we actually ask teachers if they are interested in teaching something different within a building. And if it's within a school building, we just move them from one position to the next. If it's across buildings, they have to apply, do an internal application, and the administrator then, interviews them like they would anyone else who would be interested in the position. But within a school building, there's every year we have teachers that say, I'd like to teach this grade or whatnot. And as long as they're certified to do so, we do move people around to their preferences as much as we can possibly do it, and if it meets our students' needs. So some of the vacancies that you'll see coming forward, not just tonight, but in the coming weeks as well, as we continue filling teacher and ed tech vacancies, is because some people have asked for, an assignment, a different assignment within a school.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, Peter Bingham?
Yes. Yes.
Kevin Desmond?
Yes.
Margot Harrington?
Yes.
Tyler McGinley, yes. Jennifer Stewart?
Yeah, excuse me, yes.
Mike Williams?
Yes.
And Elias Leggett-Barr?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, and then I will take a last motion to adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everyone, so much for all the work tonight.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No? All in favor? All right, here we go. Last time. Peter Bingham.
Yes.
Kevin Desmond.
Yes.
Margot Harrington.
Yes.
Kyler McGinley, yes. Jennifer Stewart.
Yes.
Mike Williams.
Yes.
And Elias Leggett Barr.